trauma and a trauma history does not preclude you, like the idea of non-monogamy, it does not disqualify you from doing non-monogamy really well, from experiencing it as really joyful. I do. Many of my clients do. But it does often require very unique pacing, a lot of attentiveness, some layered support. And that's good. That's not a bad thing.
Right.
It also means that when I see people do that, they often become absolute powerhouses of relating. Just absolutely outstanding people. Anyone would be lucky to be in relationship to, because they have put so much energy, effort, and thought into how they relate. So with that, I know it's a lot to take in. I really appreciate people who have listened to this, whether it's because it's relevant to you as an individual or because you're partnering or considering partnering with someone who has a trauma history. It's not a disqualifier. It's an invitation to do this work really well, to take it seriously.
Welcome to Playing with Fire, the podcast for people who are ready to custom build their love.
We're talking about non-monogamy, however you design it, as an individuation opportunity.
Want to leave the default and make your life spectacularly you? You're in the right place.
Ken, we have an episode today that, it feels tender right from the jump. And
just the title.
Right.
Yeah.
I was asked a question recently, actually on a podcast that I was guesting on. The host was trying to understand the perspective of like non-monogamy, and they'd come in with some assumptions. And one of their assumptions was that it didn't seem possible to do non-monogamy unless you were just really psychologically very capable and grounded and didn't have any struggles. They didn't put it exactly that way, but what their question really boiled down to is, if you have trauma, can you even do this? Like, should you just rule out non-monogamy?
Right.
And that made me think about not just my own story, but also questions that I get all the time from people who have they've been contemplating the idea of entering into some type of opening, but they've been kind of holding back. And one of the reasons that they often will tell me they're holding back from exploring even is that they are afraid that their trauma story is a disqualifier, that they won't be able to do this, or that it will inherently be harmful to them. And then I think about the clients that I've worked with who have come in and they've shared in our groups, they've shared in private work about how they have worked with their trauma while opening up. And I think, I wish everyone could see the inside of what it feels like to dismantle and deconstruct mononorms while simultaneously continuing to do your, for lack of a better word, healing work, your recovery work from trauma, because it's a wild ride. That is true. But wow, it is also, it's evidence of what is possible when we invest the time and space and prioritize doing the work.
Yeah, we see it all the time, how people in the process of learning how to relate with more sophistication, more complexity, that they have to reach inside and grow parts of them that they might not have known were there, didn't know needed growth. It's just part of the process.
So you and I, we jokingly started right before this, we hit the record button, we jokingly recorded that we could just ask the question. So I want to open up, I want to be non-monogamous, but I'm a trauma survivor. Is it possible for me? Or like, am I going to fail? And the short answer is yes, it is possible. Of course, that's also a silly answer, because just because something is possible doesn't mean that you want to undertake the challenge that will come. It
Mhm.
also doesn't mean that if you're not a trauma survivor, this will necessarily be easy. Plenty of people
Yeah,
who I
that's for
watch
sure.
struggle their way through this are very clear that the roots of their trouble is not trauma. It's
Yep.
just we're humans and
Yeah.
relating is challenging. And
I don't have a particular trauma story. I made a complete hash of it when I started out.
yeah. And something that stands out to me is that in the success stories, and I define success in non-monogamy as, are you becoming in an ongoing way, becoming more and more yourself and more able to negotiate for the relationships that you
Mhm.
actually want to have and allow yourself to be in growth oriented relating, which doesn't mean any particular number of partners. It doesn't mean any
No.
particular activities are happening. It means that you are you inside of your relationships and you enjoy those relationships even amongst their challenges. And the people who I see who have been just profoundly successful, many of them have also really deep trauma stories, very, very rich and nuanced histories of what they'd gone to, what they'd gone through in their lives. And then they decided to do this. They decided to open an existing marriage to really explore deeply what it is to have multiplicity at the center of their intimate relationships. And something that they have had a lot to say about my clients who've successfully navigated this is that they needed a lot of layered support and a lot of time and a lot of patience with their own
Mhm.
process. So we can get more deeply into it, but I just want to say, if you don't want to listen to the whole rest of the episode, the answer is yes, it is
The answer is
possible.
yes. Yes.
And just because something's possible doesn't mean you have to do it. If you are feeling pressured to do this and you feel like, I've also heard people sort of frame it as like, this is how I can't do it. And they're framing that out. What if you just don't want to? It's okay to not
It's
want
okay
to.
to not want to. Mhm.
That's your no is a complete sentence. It, like, good. That's totally fine. I don't think anyone should go on an exploration of non-monogamy because
Who doesn't want to?
who doesn't want
Yeah.
to, right?
Yeah.
And also that exploration doesn't need to look any particular way. So we talked about slowing down, and one of the things slowing down can look like is, well, have you tried just entertaining the notion and putting yourself through an educational experience and really learning about this, being in exploratory time, not in active, we're out doing this time.
Yeah.
And I find a lot of people they don't give themselves the permission to just be in the exploration first. So maybe we should hit rewind now and
Well,
do a little
yeah,
defining and
because the impact of trauma on any particular person's life, it's such a broad term. It
right.
encompasses a lot of things. So yeah, let's get specific about what we're talking about.
Right. So first off, like a broad definition of trauma, this Van der Kolk, Bessel van der Kolk's definition is it's the psychological and physiological imprint of overwhelming experiences, whatever was overwhelming for yourself, that lifts a residue in the nervous system, in your psyche. It leaves this imprint, right? And so that covers a huge, like just an enormous range of actions. Now, we could get a little bit more specific and we could talk about 3 different types of trauma. We could talk about acute trauma, chronic trauma, complex trauma. Um, for the purposes of this episode, though, because of course, what we're doing is talking about an idea. We're not talking about treatment. We're not talking about, this episode is not intended to take the place of any medical or therapeutic advice that you are getting or any treatment that you are receiving. But all 3 of those types of trauma, acute trauma, the type that happens when we have a single distressing event, a shocking event like a car accident or being in a natural disaster or witnessing violence, like that acute trauma. I have seen people with acute trauma navigate the shift into non-monogamy
Hmm.
with grace. I have also seen them struggle. Chronic trauma, that kind of trauma that comes up when you have repeated and prolonged exposure to overwhelming events, to adverse experiences like childhood abuse, long-term exposure to danger, being in a war zone, domestic violence. It's just that it starts getting baked into you. And then, of course, we could talk about complex trauma. This is that same repeated exposure, but we often talk about complex trauma being rooted in childhood with repeated abuse and neglect sort of layering up, stacking up into the psyche and forming a lot of residue in the system. And for those who are interested in complex trauma, one of the resources I always suggest to people is to look at the podcast Trauma Rewired, which is hosted by two of my colleagues and friends, Elizabeth Kristoff and Jennifer Wallace, and they talk at length about the impact of complex trauma on the nervous system and ways that you can learn to work with that. And we weave that work, that nervous system work, into our work in Year of Opening, because whether you have a diagnosis of a trauma history or not, and you said you don't have any specific trauma, and I would definitely align myself with, I am a person with complex trauma, but both of us have nervous systems.
Right.
And both of us have a way that we have framed out our stories, that we've made sense of our lives. And I could look at your life and I could absolutely write a story of traumatic events. But
Sure.
what's important is, do I have tools for working with that, for dealing with that? Do I have the support in my life through community, through supportive people in my world, and supportive techniques that I have learned to let me work with the trauma that has left this imprint in me? And when we open up, so when we go from the default setting of a monogamous experience, whether you are partnered currently or not, when you leave that default setting, the nervous system gets activated. Anytime we depart from the norms that our nervous system and psyche has just sort of evolved around, like it's just grown up around it, all of a sudden it's like taking off taking off that top layer of skin. You get a scrape, and all of a sudden, like, wow, that area is really tender.
Yeah, because our nervous systems are designed to adjust to the circumstances we're in. That's what they're for. That's why we're so adaptable as a species. And so another way to say that is that we are very sensitive to changes. So when a change happens, good or bad, when we move away from the familiar, our nervous system will go into alert mode.
Right. And so this is where it gets really interesting. Frequently, people will come to me and say, well, I don't understand, because I was the initiating partner. Like I was in an established relationship, and this was my idea, but now all my trauma is coming up, and I'm realizing, like, holy crap, I am ill-equipped. I don't know whether I can do this, but also I was the one who started it, and also I want it. Both of those things can be true at the same time. They were true for me. I definitely have a very high ACE score, adverse childhood events. That score, we can put a link in if people are unfamiliar with these terms, because this is not going to be an exhaustive episode on the topic of trauma. We would need hundreds and hundreds of hours to start getting into that.
Yeah.
But I have a high ACE score. I've had a lot of exposure to traumatic events, and yet I also was the one who leapt out of the monogamous airplane with no parachute attached to my back and just hoped everything would work its way out. And I had no idea what I was doing. And I think it was very confusing for my then husband, because he was grounded, did not have the trauma history I had. And I think he was like, what the hell? Like, you get triggered by a bad grocery store trip. How is this going to work out? Meanwhile, actually, at the beginning, I settled in really well. I was really resilient and things were going really well. And he struggled. He struggled a lot. He was having a lot of troubles, even though he had had a very grounded, non-triggery type experience of most of our relationship. We don't know what's going to come out of the woodwork.
Yep.
when we go from that default setting into, okay, we are carving our own path here. We're gonna find our way into not just from monogamy to non-monogamy, but from default setting of relationships have to look this way and work this way into we are making this up for ourselves. What does that even mean? One of the things I think can serve a person who has a trauma history very well is many times they're like their toolbox is just it's full. They've been going to therapy, they've
Mhm.
been doing
Mhm.
their work, they have equipped themselves with so many techniques and tools and methods, and they've tested them in real life discombobulating situations.
Yep.
So when they're experiencing the ups and downs, the roller coaster of opening up, they know what to do.
Right.
And now making the leap from I have this tool and it worked over here to I'm going to transfer that skill and I'm going to use it over here. That is still challenging. I'm not saying it's easy, but
But the idea that someone has been familiar with just the act of using psychological tools,
yeah,
that
using
alone
supportive.
is a good step toward the skills that really lead to successful, um, easeful, ultimately non-monogamous relationships.
Yeah, and this is sometimes where I hear people talk about, and this I experienced this myself, is all of a sudden opening up provided me evidence that the work I'd been doing was working,
Mm.
that I had been digging in and figuring out how to be me. And it's not like that made non-monogamy super easy. It did not. We made all the mistakes and all kinds of hurt happened. We didn't know what to do, and we didn't surround ourselves with community or mentorship, which was a mistake. But I did. I as I turned like at for instance when anger started to come up, well, I had gone to therapy and learned a whole bunch of things about
Mhm.
anger and learned about how anger worked for me and what brought it up. The same for I a couple of times in early days I fell into some times where I was really struggling with what I would consider like low level depressive symptoms, not acute, but it was getting hard, but I had tools for that. And then employing those tools helped me recognize that I was that elusive thing, that thing that people say like, "Oh, I want the healing to happen." Maybe it is happening. Maybe you just need to see it. I got a lot of evidence that in fact I had been growing up, I had been maturing, and I had been doing my healing work by putting myself in situations that required resilience and required presence, and finding out that I could required patience. Oh my God,
Mhm.
the day someone called me
You
patient,
didn't even know you had that, did you?
I had no idea.
Right.
But there it was. There
There
was
was.
so much evidence that I had those skills. So
Yep.
that's something that I think taking an inventory of what you're actually showing up with, and making sure that you're giving yourself credit for what you're doing
Yeah.
along the path, like while you're discovering,
Yep.
is important.
And the narrative that we can tell ourselves, the narrative that, oh, this is so hard because of my past, because of my background, because of the particular things that have gone on in my life, because of my particular trauma. Well, all of those things, you will never know how hard it was going to be if things were different.
Yeah, yeah,
And
that's just
I find
reality.
that a useful antidote to the narratives that sometimes come up in my head for why is this so hard?
Yeah, I I I think it's really important that we name now too that our often there is a misalignment, and this isn't just about trauma survivors. So many people during their opening up process, they'll realize that their intellectual alignment has happened. They've made like a philosophical leap forward
Mm.
into, okay, I read about non-monogamy, or I read about polyamory, or I learned some terms and I learned some ideas, and my head is on board.
Mhm.
That sounds great, and yes, I am in. And their body is like, oh, well, good for you, but fuck off. I have no interest
Yep.
in aligning with that, and I'm not
Yep.
going to do it yet. And so it's important to remember that just just being cognitively on board with non-monogamy doesn't mean that you're going to have a nervous system that's actually prepared and a body that's going to just be like, yeah, sure, we got this, no problem. And and also, I experience symptoms of dysregulation, and that doesn't mean, I also get to work with that dysregulation. So
Hmm.
again, we're back to, none of these is a disqualifier, but it does depend on where do you want to spend your energy.
Yeah.
So I spent way more energy in the first several years of our relationship managing my own dysregulation, going to therapy, learning how my trauma history was interacting with the relational systems that I was setting up, than you did.
Yep.
And but it's not like you didn't also have to then figure out, oh, I'm also dealing with dysregulation. So it's not just traumatized people experience dysregulation. We
Right.
all do.
No. Yep.
So that said, we're all going to need tools for moving from just an intellectual capacity to do non-monogamy into an embodied capacity. So what are your choices of tools? Here we are talking on this podcast. We talk and we talk, 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 talk. But that's not all you and I do. Like individually and together, we have practices that support our nervous system, that
Yep.
support our somatic experience of, well, life is hard and my trauma gets re-triggered and I need to work with it. And all of those practices start with the body. And I think in the podcast context, we could maybe lose sight
Yeah.
of
Right.
that
Because here we
and
are
forget,
talking heads. Yep.
and forget that, oh, but you know what? A lot of times working with my whole self will look like needing to pause, needing to do some regulating activities, needing to end an episode that we're recording because the topic of the episode has triggered me. And
Hmm.
now I need to actually end this and we're going to have to come back and start another time. Or recognizing that I'm telling a story about you and noticing like, oh, maybe I might have dysregulated you live while we're doing this and realizing, yep, just like when we're in the rest of our life,
That's right. Yeah.
we're not just talking
we're
heads.
still in life. Yeah.
We're whole bodies.
Yep.
And the thing that I feel has been so helpful, and I wonder if you think the same, it, we know we know that there are things to do when dysregulation comes up, when triggers happen, whether I trigger myself or you trigger me or vice
Hmm.
versa, and we can remind each other. And we've learned to
Yes.
believe each other,
Hmm.
right? So it's like it's not uncommon for me to say, "Hey, that episode was hard. I need to go hop in the cold plunge and then do some regulating activities afterwards." Or for you to come in and wrap me up in a great big belly to belly big hug and just say, "Let's just breathe for 90 seconds because that was a lot."
Yep.
And that's just talking
That's just talking.
about
Yeah. And
non-monogamy and our history in non-monogamy.
I frequently, before we record, do some regulating activities, whether I'm feeling anything or not. Like, well, I've probably normalized the stress that's built up over the day, and I don't want to walk in and bring all of that stress in. And then if either one of us gets triggered a little, it just starts to amplify. So yeah, we have somatic tools to bring that body that I'm carrying along with this head, um, to be supportive of what we're trying to do here, rather
Yeah.
than trying to run away.
And moving into what can we do, one of the things we can all do is learn methods that are supportive for us. It's going to be different for everyone, but we all have nervous systems, so there's a place to start.
Yep.
Is some practical tools. So we'll put our training for nervous system regulation for complex relationships. We'll put that link in this episode notes. You can find it on our YouTube channel, and that's just a free training to get you started off with the idea of like, hey, there are things we
There
can
are
do,
things to do.
but also building up a library of ways that we can work with this, and then normalizing. So something that you and I do for each other is normalize that being triggered doesn't mean that the relationship style is a problem.
Yep.
The relationship structure itself. And now I want to also offer the counter argument. It also doesn't mean that it isn't the problem.
Right. Yeah.
There have been times when I have stopped and really felt my way through it for a period of weeks or months and been like, does this work for me? Is this how I want to spend my energy? Because I do think it's reasonable to, at least for the first few years, expect that you'll be spending a fair amount of active energy navigating the overlap of how your trauma healing is going and how the
Mhm.
dysregulation of reinventing your relationship paradigm, the overlap of that Venn diagram. Yeah, you're going to spend a lot of your energy. Is this where you want to spend your energy?
Yep.
Now,
And that's a time bound question. Not bound, but is this how I want to spend my energy now? Mm.
and well, I mean, and is this how I want to spend my energy now? But also, I have to make a commitment because I can't just dip
Yeah.
in and out. Also, there
Right.
has to be some sustained presence to, yep, I can't only do this when it's easy.
Oh,
And that happens a
sure.
lot.
Yeah.
Fall into
Mhm.
the well, I do want non-monogamy when things are feeling good. And when they're not, I think
Mm.
we should not. There does have to be some sustained presence to, yeah, if I'm paradigm shifting,
Yep.
then yeah, there's going to be ups and downs. And my in my experience, yeah, I'm not kidding when I say years. And what you get out of it is huge. It's huge what you can get out of that sustained efforting toward your 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 expression in life being more authentic, toward living in a relational reality that fits you better. And again, I want to stress, this isn't about how many partners you have. This is about shifting from the default setting of, I'm going to follow the monogamous default assumptions and be unconscious about it, shifting to, I'm going to be conscious about this, and then I'm going to create the relational system I actually want. You might still decide to have one partner or zero partners,
Mhm.
but shifting to a conscious paradigm, there's a huge payoff. And we confront many of our biggest blockages, the junk that's been in our way. It's going to come right to the surface and be right in front of us. Attachment activation is likely to happen. So our attachment system, that part of our psychological being, it's there because humans are wired to be connected to primary caregivers, because otherwise, as infants, we would die, because we need care as infants. We're born really helpless. So we have this system that comes on board, the attachment system, and we need it. And the attachment system being there means that when we are experiencing a lack of belonging, a lack of connection, when we feel ostracized or we feel like we are abandoned, when we feel like, even if those things aren't objectively real, when we feel those things, yep, attachment activation happens. We feel reactive, we feel terror, we feel engulfment if our attachment system is reacting to, oh my gosh, my partner is just engulfing my whole system, because we do tend to transfer our attachment connection from our parents in early days to our romantic connections. Attachment activation is going to happen. And so since it is, and since we're talking about, can trauma survivors do non-monogamy? Well, of course, if I layer in that attachment, like my system getting activated with, and this also triggers not just my trauma triggers, but then the story of being out of control, or I'm not good, I can't do this, or if it triggers you into a whole narrative, now we've got layers that need to be worked through. You need support and the time to work through this. So one of the biggest investments in paradigm shifting is time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a bold step away from the monogamous point of view to the non-monogamous point of view. It's a single step isn't going to do it.
Right.
It's because it's the thing is, maybe you could, but then the monogamous system is still there pulling you back. So it's this constant.
We're continually re-exposed
Yeah, we're
to the
continually
default of
re-exposed.
monogamy,
So we got to get that flywheel going. It takes time.
which also means we are continually exposed to the idea that we're doing something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have shame triggers
Right.
attached to your trauma story, well, now I'm doing something wrong. I'm outside. I don't belong. I'm doing something that is against, that will get me thrown out. All of those things come up. We need to come up with entirely new frameworks. And ironically, this is so frustrating. A step away from default monogamy that divides us all up into little dyads that are supposed to be self-sustaining units, which we have plenty of evidence. This is not a self-sustaining system. That is capitalism and colonialism, like all wrapped up in how do we control people? Well, we break them down into tiny little units. And when we do that, they're easier to control because they are weaker.
Mm-hmm.
If we were embedded in a much more resilient fabric of community, and our relationships that are romantic or sexual weren't the only relationship we had, but instead we felt truly held, well, everything we've just been talking about would be different.
Right.
But if you are not, and the vast majority of us in Western culture are not like deeply embedded in community, giving ourselves time to address multiple factors, address the realities of do I want to change that? Can I start creating more community for myself? But also, can I build up the tools and the resilience? And and I guess this is the other thing I would suggest, can I be exploratory and experimental about non-monogamy without rushing into actions that are just way beyond my current capacity?
Mm-hmm.
So I said I jumped out of the airplane with no parachute. That is the metaphor I use so frequently. I see people who are really excited about non-monogamy. They're really excited they've met somebody that they really want to take action with, or they really want to jump out and go date. And so they leap out of their current monogamous airplane into the unknown, not even realizing that there was a parachute to go get. And the parachute is all of this stuff we've been talking about. It's the community, it's the mentorship, it's the language, it's shifting your awareness of, hey, maybe I don't even know what I don't know, and really building that in and recognizing, oh wait, I'm going to need to recalibrate regularly. I'm going to have to build in new ways of checking in with myself, to check on my capacity, to check on my partners and my friends' capacity, and see what's going on for all of us.
And like all new habits, they take a little time to sink in.
Right. So first we can learn them.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can open up a book and I can learn some of the things that I might want to have in place. And then I have to learn how to apply them. And then I have to practice applying them over time. And then I have to recognize that some of them are really hard for me and some come really easy for me. But time is such a necessary ingredient here. And as we go through that time, not everything has to be, jumping into the deep end of the pool or like doing the hardest thing possible. We've had clients who've come in and they've done the year of opening from the perspective of, we don't even know what exactly opening will be. We don't even know, but we're gonna learn. We're gonna just learn what this could be. That's a great spot to start. Love that for you.
That's a great spot. Absolutely.
Go for it.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had plenty of people who jumped. They jumped hard and they are in the middle of trying to figure out whether they've got wings or whether I'm gonna show up and help them strap a parachute on. And all of them need to figure out what the pacing feels like for themselves. Need to build the awareness of, does this feel okay? And when it doesn't feel okay, can I be okay with it not being okay? Can Can I let it be that, okay, I wanted to go on this adventure, or maybe I didn't actually even want to, but then I consented to, and I do want to be on it, but what do I how do I let it be okay that it kind of sucks right now? And the answer to that is, what's the story that you tell
Hmm.
yourself about this? Is it okay that something is uncomfortable? We got to get our reps in.
Yep.
This is
Yeah.
like, we're gonna go through this huge learning curve, and for some people, it's gonna take months before they feel like they're having some fun. For some people, it's just gonna be a few weeks before they feel like they're having some fun in this. I think there is the potential for fun and connection for anybody who wants it, but I don't know exactly what it'll look like, and you don't know what it'll look like. We're just going to have to make our peace with it being okay to be wobbly and awkward, and let ourselves be experimental.
Yeah, and that's such a general statement. Learning anything, I have had to commit myself to being wobbly and awkward
Yeah,
while I practice this new thing. And it can feel away when it's human relationships,
yeah,
which is why we recommend, as you did, um, a being embedded in a supportive fabric of people.
yeah. I mean, it's why I shifted so much of my work from private work to group work, because
Mm.
having a close knit community, a small group of people who are getting together week after week and sharing this, it changes your perspective. Because instead of it just being, oh my God, I can't believe how hard this is, and that, like, and it feels like it's all about me, is, oh, we are all going through dramatic changes and incremental changes. We're all experiencing our transitions differently. We're all experiencing a need for different pacing. It just getting the inside view of that is so valuable. I also think it's really powerful to name that, like, having having other people around who are going both slower and faster than you, or whatever you
Mhm.
deem as slower and faster, can also help you feel a little bit less like what you're doing is like the hardest, or not. Like, it just gives us a little bit of perspective.
Yeah.
There are a couple more things I want to mention before we close this episode out, about what can we do. And one of the things that comes up frequently, a catchphrase we hear in the non-monogamous world, is move at the pace of the slowest person. And so, like, the metaphor here is, well, if you're all out hiking and you're going to hike up a mountain, and we all have different capacity, and we all have different strengths, and everybody's going to hike up this mountain at a different pace, and we all have the ability to manage it at a different pace. But if we all want to stay together, then we got to move at the pace of the slowest person. That's just what we have to do. And I want to extend that metaphor a little bit. In this case, you definitely cannot carry the slowest person.
Mhm.
You cannot pick them up and put them on your psychological back and carry them. That would be the metaphor for what it looks like to do their work for them. It's not possible. It doesn't work. But I just want to say about moving at the pace of the slowest person. I think that is important, and it's extra important to surround yourself with some community too, because sometimes a person who's struggling to make progress, what's happening is they are locked in their imagination that this is impossible, that their life is impossible, that they can't do this. And it can be helpful to sort of stretch the imagination, to put yourself in community and see that other people are trudging up the mountain, or flying up the mountain. They're doing the thing, and you can start to imagine how you perhaps could move at whatever your pace is through this. And what it means to slow down, right? To slow down and be with a person moving at the pace they're moving, that itself is going to require some regulation.
Right.
That itself
Yeah.
is going to require some ability to just be with, wow, this doesn't go just the way I want it to. Yeah, that's relationship.
Yep.
That's relationship, which doesn't, and I have heard people say that they felt like they were being that they were trapped by their partner's slowness. And what
Hmm.
I would say is, are you trapped by their slowness, or are they stonewalling you? If, for instance, they are refusing to engage in any learning about this, but they tell you, like, week by week, they tell you they want to do this, but then they refuse to actually show up and like go to meetings with you, or read any of the books or listen to any of the podcasts. That would fall into the category of stonewalling more so than slow pace. Versus, let's say they're learning, they're trying, and they're finding that it really is. It's the change is sort of incremental. There's also a lot we could get into around negotiating. Like, what does it mean to be doing non-monogamy? Does it mean having sex with other people? Does it mean
Oh,
having
yeah.
multiple relationships? Does it mean, or does opening up mean being in an exploration of what it is to build our life around more than just the default monogamous dyad? Are there actually a lot of ways we can explore around that topic? Um,
And
Having support through this is really
oh,
important.
yeah, for sure. And support from people who are, they don't have to be walking the exact same path, but it's very helpful if they're open to it
And have some shared
and some
language
shared language. Yep.
and space for us all to be
Yeah.
on a unique track.
Yep.
So we also need two other things. One is we need clear agreement practices. The way that I see people making agreements is often so not trauma informed.
Mm.
It's I see people making agreements that are basically open ended. They're supposed to just be like, you just set it up and they last forever. That's not realistic. It's not for anyone, but for someone who has a trauma history, no, we need to build in an iterative practice of revisiting agreements, understanding how we're growing and changing. We get deeply into that in our workshop on called Unruly. It's an agreements lab for how do we learn an agreements process, and that workshop is available, and that's a good starting point. But honestly, making agreements that are flexible and resilient and actually teach you how to be in better relationship with each other, it takes time.
Yeah.
So I mean, we do that in the year of opening. We do it over and over again. It's a big deal. And the last thing I want to put on this list of like skills and actions we can take is um, putting in place really great repair practices. Um, Rupture is going to happen.
It's
Like that's
absolutely reasonable to expect there to be ruptures. You've got two independent people, or three, or four, or however many independent people, just trying to live their lives together. They're going to bump up against each other.
right. And people with trauma history often need very explicit repair
Hmm.
rituals. It's why the apology and accountability ladder exists in our programs. It is why the dismantling defensiveness technique exists. It's why we get very specific, and we make little routines, little rituals to help us create active repair. And we teach those inside of the year of opening. And there is also a podcast and a set of skill building videos available on our YouTube channel for people who are ready to make explicit repair a part of their relationship. And this is something that's been the game changer for me. Explicit
Hmm.
repair has let me do non-monogamy so much more easily, because, and also when if the people in my life are willing to engage in explicit repair, I know that they're good people for me to be with. And people who aren't, they're not good matches for me. They're just not. So it's also for me a qualifier for who can I relate with as a trauma survivor.
Well, I have noticed that every time I learn a new repair skill, um, my relationships level up.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's finish out by just reiterating trauma and a trauma history does not preclude you, like the idea of non-monogamy. It does not disqualify you from doing non-monogamy really well, from experiencing it as really joyful. I do. Many of my clients do. But it does often require very unique pacing, a lot of attentiveness, some layered support. And that's good. That's not a bad thing.
Right.
It also means that when I see people do that, they often become absolute powerhouses of relating. Just absolutely outstanding people. Anyone would be lucky to be in relationship to, because they have put so much energy, effort, and thought into how they relate. So, with that, I know it's a lot to take in. I really appreciate people who have listened to this, whether it's because it's relevant to you as an individual or because you're partnering or considering partnering with someone who has a trauma history. It's not a disqualifier. It's an invitation to do this work really well, to take it seriously.
Thank you so much for sharing all of this from your point of view and from your learning of your own experience of dealing with trauma and all of the people that you have worked with and helped. Because it is absolutely not a blocker. It's just going to inform your particular terrain as you navigate your relationships.
Yeah. Thanks, Ken.
We talk to you all the time. It is absolutely imperative to me that we get to hear from you as well.
Yes, please.
So we'd love to invite you to join us. Join Ken and I. We're holding monthly Ask Me Anythings. You can show up, bring your questions from podcast episodes, from your relationships, bring questions about non-monogamy, about individuation, about relationship skills. We would love to share space with you. We're hosting these AMAs free of charge for our podcast listeners. You are the Playing with Fire community, and it matters a ton to us that we connect with you directly. So
Oh,
go.
I would so love to hear your questions and it'd be so awesome.
Yeah. Go to joliehamilton.com/AMA and you'll find a way to sign up real quick and get an invitation to join us in a small group where we're going to get together and talk about all things non-monogamy, individuation, and relationships.